So, let me start by telling you that if anybody wanted to find out about speaking in Yiddish, I'm off the hook. We're doing English. Thanks, guys. Okay, so let me start by telling you that I'm not going to frighten you. Okay? This is a tense topic. People are concerned, as you should be. You're here because you're concerned. But I promise I'm not going to tell you any stories. I'm not going to frighten you. I'm not going to do anything other than to empower you to be able to have the conversations with the children. The research shows that when people are frightened, they can't concentrate because the fear closes everything out. So therefore, we made the book in a fun-filled way, in a geschmacka. Take a look at all the pages, some pretty, important things we're discussing. There's nothing there that... I'm going to turn this off. I'll speak up. If you can't hear me, let me know. It's too much of an echo. So there's no reason that you should feel frightened. The research shows that if I scared you with a story or two that would get you thinking in a frightening way, you wouldn't remember what I said by the time you hit the door. So that's why we want you to have these conversations with your children in a pleasant way, in a relaxed way. So there's really no need for any of this. I'm going to empower you. I'm going to teach you why child safety education works, because I think it's important that you should to really understand what you're trying to teach the kids. I've given a few hundred of these classes all around the world, and we keep getting communication from parents thanking us that children were protected from being abused by these lessons. And like I said, like the Manal said, I hope, Mitzvah Shem, you won't need any of it, but this is really, really the ultimate protection. So here's how it works. Shkoyach for the introduction. He said the story from the mitzvah. Said the Welt took by they tell people who tell speeches for a joke. You should wait a year till you tell it over to the same audience. A story you should wait at least a month. A Dvar Torah you could say twice in the same sentence. Nobody will remember in the same speech. Little joke. Okay, so thank you so much. Okay, so let's get going. Why does child safety education work? And what are you really teaching your children? So, just to understand, what you're teaching your kids is what's considered normal and appropriate, and teaching them about their boundaries, their space that they're supposed to have, entitled to have, and teach them that certain things that people do is just it's not appropriate. Nobody should be in your space. Nobody should be making you uncomfortable. And once the children absorb the lessons, it just becomes normal for them. We are concerned about it, so we get nervous. They're not nervous about it unless you make them nervous. You're teaching them rules just like you would tell them not to cross the street or not to touch a stove. The same. They're supposed to be a little bit, obviously you're supposed to let them know that it's important, but you're not supposed to frighten them. You're just supposed to inform them of these 4 messages. And the messages are, and I'm going to explain each of them, okay? No secrets from parents. That's message number 1. Teach your children that no one is ever allowed to say to them, this is between us. Don't tell your parents about it. That's message number 1. Okay. Message number 2 is your body belongs to you. That they have ownership over their own body. They have control over their own body. Good touching, bad touching. Some touching is okay. Some touching is not okay. And to explain to the kids, which is which. And finally, no one has the right to make you feel uncomfortable. Okay. These are the 4 messages, and that's really it. Your children at a very young age know what's appropriate, for example, at a table. If you invited me to your home for a Shabbos meal, and I started, I went and took my shoes and socks off and put my feet on the table. How old does a child have to be to know that that's not normal? How old would the child be to start laughing? 2, 3, 4, right? A very young age. They know that they shouldn't be eating with their hands. They shouldn't throw food. These are rules of eating meals. And at a very young age, kids know what's considered normal. This is okay. This is not okay. Now, here's how it works and why it works. There's a thing called grooming, where Rahman al-Islam, people who abuse children, try to find out if a child has been spoken to. If this kid knows enough that if the molester starts up with them, they're going to tell someone. So what's a molester looking for? What type of child? They want children who are naive, who don't know these lessons that I'm teaching you tonight, and who don't have a close family connection. Okay? When a thief, if somebody wants to steal, if somebody wants to make a phony real estate deal and tell people that I'm building houses and on the other side of whatever it is, and you can get if you put down some money, you'll get a great rate, and it's all a scam. What did they look for? They look for people who know nothing about money, and they look for people who are isolated. Okay, it's that simple. So, in other words, that's how the abuse process works. Just like somebody who's trying to make a scam on someone tries to find out a little bit, who is this person? They're not going to bring the contract to the first meeting because they don't know what he knows or she knows. Maybe maybe their father's a lawyer. Maybe they have connections. Maybe they know a lot about money. So what do? They make a first meeting. Let's go out for coffee. And you say, tell me, would you be interested in a good deal? I have these homes. It's beautiful. 30% off for the first month. All you got to do is put down $20,000. Okay? And then they'll ask him, tell me a little about yourself. So what could that person say during that first meeting that would encourage the thief, the ganav, to go ahead with the pitch? So if they says, I say, tell me about your family. Well, we both my wife and I, we both live in England, and we have absolutely no family here. Okay, so the person thinks to themselves, I got it, check. If they say, Baruch Hashem, we have a great family, everybody's close to everybody, then he's going to run away. They're going to have coffee, and then he'll never show up again. And the other thing they want to find out is how financially knowledgeable are they? It's real simple. 2 things. There are other details, but that's basically it. You want to find people who are naive, and you want to find people who don't have a close family connection. Because, and then they'll ask him, tell me, do you know anything about real estate? And they say, I don't know, I'll tell you the truth, we just got married, all the money's in the mattress, in cash, right? So then the guy says, fantastic, they don't know anything. And if they say, oh yeah, my parents made me from the time I was 10, I had my own account, and I know a lot about money, and that, so they run away. That's what they do with the children. They want to find out who's naive, and they want to find out who doesn't speak to their parents on a regular basis. And unfortunately, it's not that hard to tell. So it's that simple. If you get in the habit of speaking to your children all the time, teaching your children that you can tell me anything no matter what, whatever goes on in your life, we want to know about it, even if I'm going to be upset. You can tell me anything. Now, I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes and take questions. So you can ask me during the questions, well, what happens if they tell me things I don't like? Okay, we'll get to that later. But if you have these regular conversations with your children, and the children know that they can come home and talk to you, and you're going to ask them, how was your day? And with some more details, and you teach them these things, that's what protects them. The abusers run away from kids who are educated. It's really that simple. When I first started, getting into this, trying to do abuse prevention, I thought to myself, what many of you might be thinking is, how can you train a little kid to protect themselves if a big bulvan wants to start up with them? How can you do this? They're not strong enough. They don't listen, okay? I tell them, stop fighting with your sister. I'm standing right there. They don't listen to me. So how am I going to listen? Make a kal v'chomer. A year from now, how's the kid? But you see, it works. It really does work. I'm going to tell you a few stories to illustrate that. So that's it. You got to teach your kids to understand the boundaries, be an involved parent, get used to talking to your children, and seeing that they know these things. The most heartbreaking thing when I people tell me, I say, listen, I think your school or your community, or are you doing child safety education with your children, to an individual, and it's really sad when people tell me something like, we don't want to give them any ideas. Baruch Hashem, they don't know anything. You just gave the molester an absolute gift. I ask them, when people tell me, I don't want the kids to know, look through the book. There's nothing there that's inappropriate. It's just stuff. There's no reason. There is not one thing that's less tsanua that you shouldn't want to talk about. Fakir, I think this is the ultimate sneeze. You're teaching them that this space belongs to them. So when people tell me I don't want to give the kids ideas, I ask them, when your bar mitzvah boy, when you give them a nice watch, or you send your kid out with daughter with the jewelry, do you tell them to be careful that someone might steal it from them, or you say, I don't want to give them any ideas about stealing? So that you understand that you got to protect stuff, right? We don't think that way with money stuff, right? You send your kid to the grocery store, you send him to buy something, or give it to. You say, listen, this is your Hanukkah money, but watch out, make sure nobody takes it from you. Why don't we say the same thing there? So that's the attitude we have to have. Let me go over the 4 things. I'll walk you through the book quickly, and then I'll take your questions, okay? So the first thing is no secrets from parents. That's the reason that works is because one of the main things that an abuser wants to do, one of their objectives are to separate the kids from the parents. And Rahman al-Islam, when you see after the fact, a lot of the abusers tell things like, I'm going to kill your parents, I'll hurt your parents, or I'll hurt you if you tell them. They try to separate children from parents. Obviously because of what we just spoke about. They don't want the kids talking to you. So you teach them that if anybody tells them, this is between us, look, I was a Manali of Yeshiva for many years, there's no reason in this world that I should ever tell a Talmud of mine, a student, say, listen, that this is between us. That should never happen. It's just not, it's a huge red flag. So that's number 1, no secrets from parents. If you want to know if it's effective, a number of years ago, I found that actually this week, right before the summer, probably about 20 years ago, I found out, because I deal with the kids, I found out that somebody was abusing children in Monsey. I didn't know who it was, or I would have gone to the police. But I got very nervous. So I called a meeting, just like Imrei did. I want all of you down here. I called in a meeting of the parents. I didn't know enough about this to do it myself. So I brought somebody in, a therapist, to speak to the parents along the lines of what I'm telling you tonight. This was in June, at the end of June. 11 months later, the 2nd grade teacher in our yeshiva did an arts and crafts project with the boys. And what they did is they made like flowers to take home. So the first day they colored it and cut it, whatever. And the next day they painted it, and then they dried and they took it home. So go ahead, folks. So the teacher tells the kids on the way out, don't tell mommy, it's a surprise. Okay? The teacher wasn't doing anything wrong. There was nothing chas v'shalom inappropriate there. But, she's been doing it all the years. You just tell the kids this. So we dismissed that group of kids at 4:15. I kid you not, it's a true story, just the way I'm telling you. 4:17, as the kids were going to the bus stops, my phone was started ringing. Almost every parent in their 2nd grade called me to let me know that the kids came home. Now, it was really funny because, all this education is a framework. You add your own stuff. It's not, these are general ideas, and you add. So I add, when the therapist told the parents the rules, one of them is tell the kids no secrets from parents. I got up and I said, listen, folks, tell the kids, I said, your fathers and mothers, tell the children that if someone ever tells them to keep a secret from you, and they tell you, you're going to give them a big prize. So we don't raise dummies in Monsey. I promise you, the kids came home and they said, Mommy, Mora said we shouldn't tell you. You know? So, and I was shocked. The parents were shocked. They said, I can't believe they listened. They were shocked that the kids remembered it. That this stuff really works. This stuff really, really works. Okay? So that's message number one. Again, no secrets from parents. Your body belongs to you is the second one. That you're entitled to personal space. And that means that it's just normal for you to have space around you. The research shows that even if you have two children, everything is exactly the same, and one of the kids has their own drawer at home, and the culture of your home is such that if another child wants to go to the drawer, they ask them for permission. And it's considered to be a space of theirs. The research shows that the kid who has their own drawer is more likely to defend themselves against an abuser than the kid who doesn't, even a little thing like that. Because once you train them that things belong to them, they can extrapolate, they can learn from that their bodies belong to them also. Okay, so that's message number two. And you see, this goes at a very young age. I mentioned before about, table rules. Ask yourself a question. How old does a child have to be to know that something belongs to them? Think about it. How old does a kid have to be to know what the pacifier and the blanket and the, right? How old? 2? Younger? 3? So you can't teach children at a very young age that they belong to them. That's really what it is. You're teaching them about their own space and that they have a right to this space. Okay? Good touching, bad touching. Some touching is okay. Some touching is not okay. There are a number of ways to convey this. One of the easier ways is just to say that a spot, anything that's covered by a bathing suit, it's not appropriate for anyone to touch you. And if somebody does, come and tell me. That's a simple way to do it. You can come up with your own ways. That's probably, a tsanua, an easy way to convey this message. The experts on this say that it's very important that you specify except for, to be very, very precise when you say that. In other words, you're telling your children no one's allowed to touch you in a spot covered by a bathing suit. If you say that to a 3-year-old, you're bathing them. They go to school, and if they soil themselves, they dirty themselves, somebody cleans up. So you can't just say no one is allowed to. You say no one except for. So the experts say that you should not say something like except for people in our family or except for people that they know, because nebuch, as hard as it is to imagine, many of the abusers, Rahman al-Slan, are family members or people in their very close circle. So you should say things like, no one is ever allowed to touch you in a spot covered by a bathing suit, except for, let's say, Tati and Mami when we're bathing you, Bobby when we're away, really specific. A doctor during an exam when one of us are in the room, more in school, but very, very precise. And then, as your children get older, teach them, they say, you're old enough right now to wash your private spots by yourself. And you're gradually giving them a message that this is something that they should take over that space because they're old enough to do it on their own. Okay? And the last thing is no one has the right to make you feel uncomfortable. It's really, that's the hardest of the 4 to teach, because the first 3 are very simple. It's very clear, no secrets from parents, your body belongs to you, good touching, bad touching. This is really, what you're really teaching your children is to follow their instincts, to trust their own radar. And I've heard it now from so many victims that they were abused by someone and they felt uncomfortable long before the abuse started. So what you're really teaching your kids is to follow their instincts. And if somebody bugs them out and makes them uncomfortable, they have a right to run away, and you will support them as a parent and not ask them all kinds of questions about it. And I'll tell you why it's important. Excuse me. Since the abusers go through this grooming process, in other words, they gradually break the children's space down. So let's say they'll come and touch them on the hand, they'll touch them on the shoulder. They're not going to go right away and start up with them because, again, they don't know if their parents went to a class like this and spoke to them. So they gradually start invading their space, or they look at them, or they get closer to them, or they sit next to them. It could be someone their age or older. The problem is that kids aren't often verbal enough to explain everything. So if they say, somebody touched me on my shoulder, you'll say, did they touch you anywhere else? Say, no. Oh, okay, shoulder's fine. But maybe their hand was there way too long. Or maybe they were just rubbing them in a way that made it uncomfortable. Or maybe they were sitting next to them, right next to each other. Now, how close should two people sit to each other? It depends where. It depends how busy, empty the room is. If you're riding a New York subway train during rush hour, you can pick your feet up and you won't fall down, right? Because everybody's just kvetched up, batish, right? So I'm saying everybody's just sekvetched. So it's normal to sit right next to somebody. If you go into an empty subway train, 1 o'clock in the morning, and there's two people in the subway car, and someone comes and sits right next to you, you're going to run out of there. Now, a child might not be able to verbalize. Somebody sat next to me. You're all sitting next to each other, right? Ben Chai did sit next to each other. There's a context that's missing, and kids aren't often verbal enough to express this. And that's why your message to them is, if you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to explain yourself to anybody. If you feel uncomfortable, get out. And I will support you as your parent. And there's a lot that you can do in this area as parents, grandparents. If you're playing with the kids, I always, Baruch Hashem, since we started having grandchildren 10 years ago, I just, make a fool out of myself like so many other grandparents. But so when I play with the kids, I read them stories, I do stuff. I always say, if Zaidi does something that you don't like, tell me and I'll stop. It's really important. If your kid comes home and says, Bobby gives me these kisses and tell them, tell your mother, don't do it. Kids have a right to say no, because not disrespectfully, but it's very important that you give them this message that their comfort, they're able to come and speak to you if somebody makes them feel uncomfortable, and you will back them. Okay? 4 simple messages. It's the beginning of a conversation. It's not this book or these conversations that you have. Again, like I said, there's books in Yiddish and English. We purposely made it, by the way. If you look at the book, if you have a book near you, just go. I'll go through the Yiddish book first. It's really the same thing. Basically, it's the same content. We just made it. I actually worked with a group of 7-8 people in Kiryas Yisrael. They bought 3,000 books from us over the years. I actually worked with them to make the Yiddish book appropriate for Haim Homes. And so both books, what they both have in common is that it starts with regular stuff. It starts with things that won't make you nervous and won't make them nervous. Because if I put the middle pages here that talk about grooming and stuff like that, you get nervous when you start talking, and I don't want you to do that. Again, like I said, there's no scary faces here. There's nothing here that should frighten you or a child. So it talks about general safety. Then we have stranger danger, to be careful to stay away from strangers. Strangers make up less than 5% of all abuse. It's way more likely to be someone the children know. But we need to tell them, of course, to stay away from strangers. Tell your parents where you're going. And then these are the pages. These are the pages that are about this subject. So now that we've gone over this stuff, you should be recognizing some stuff here. Okay, someone makes you feel uncomfortable, get out. If someone's giving you gifts, this is even somebody that's having fun with you still isn't allowed to invade your space or touch you in a way you don't want to be touched. This just tells us that if something happened a long time ago, you should tell your parents. if something happened a long time ago. I want you to know when we did this book in English first, I wasn't sure it was important enough to spend 2 pages on this. And it turned out that a very, very high number of kids who come forward who were either in bad situations or were abused in the past, and now they're able to get help because they told their parents. A lot of them, come up because they saw this page specifically, and it says if something happened, that's a summer scene, and this is a winter scene. So if during the winter, if you remember something that happened during the summer, tell your parents. This is speak to your mom every night, okay? And this other one is this is my space. This space belongs to me, and then we go back to regular safety stuff, okay? So I hope I gave you everything you need. It sounds almost too simple. It sounds like you'd love for me to come with something much more complicated. It's not. This is it. That's what they want to know. When an abuser comes to a place, they judge which communities are safe. If communities protect abusers and make fundraisers for them and say Sekenish Zan, that's a place where abusers like to hang out. They get it. So communities have to do the right thing to keep our children safe, which means standing up for the children, reporting abusers to the authorities. It's all part of this. But again, like I said, they want to find out which kids are okay, they're safe to abuse. And by telling them these simple things, you really make your kids children that abusers just don't want to have anything to do with. I'll be glad to take your questions. It could be about this. It could be a question off this. Go ahead. Yes, please.
What happens if your kid tells you the story instead of using the angry attitude?
Okay, that's great. So, great question. So what happens if a child tells you that they were abused? So try to be calm. Listen. Just listen. Acknowledge that, thank you for telling me. I'm sure this is very hard for you to say. And get a professional in to sort this all out. Let me tell you, and I speak to all of you, if you were abused as a child, you can't do this on your own. It's too much. It's too much to sort this out on your own. You really need to go to a professional. You don't need to. I encourage you, if you were abused yourself as a child, to really go and get help. It affects your life in so many ways. And we know, Nebuch, that, there's a lot of tragedy because, people don't, it's not reported. So I really encourage you to encourage your kids to speak to you, get a professional in. What are the signs to look for? You didn't ask that. What are the signs to look for to see if your child was abused? So usually it's noticing something dramatic, where you notice something different than it was before. Think of it this way. If your child is having trouble in school or in life, or they're having tantrums or crying or wetting their bed if they're past that age, if it goes like this, like it's a gradual thing, you just see some problems going, it's usually not something like this. When you see, boom, when you see sudden real change, they're frightened to go certain places. They tell you things like, please don't send me, fill in the space. Please don't, I don't want to go to shul. I don't want to go to this and this uncle's house. Listen very carefully. Doesn't mean that everything's abuse, obviously. Don't see an abuser everywhere. But be cognizant, be aware of sudden changes in your children's life. You see them crying suddenly a lot, or suddenly they're afraid, or they're bedwetting, or anything like that. Those are signs that you want to look for. Did I answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Please. Such good Talmidim. You guys get everything. I'm very impressed. Shmuel, you're having a good effect on everybody. Go ahead, folks. Anybody else? Yes, please. Can I ask you to just speak up, please?
When you say to get professional help,
Yes.
take me from there. What do I do? Authorities?
Okay, so when I say professional help, so a good thing to do is to take a licensed, credentialed therapist. Every therapist, and that's another way to know, look, I don't want to go to the police right away. I don't know, it might be nothing. So usually a very good way of doing it is going to a professional therapist. They are mandated reporters. So any professional therapist who suspects abuse is obligated. They could lose the license or worse if they don't report it. So if you suspect, obviously, if you see that there's abuse, in my opinion, you go straight to the cops. Go straight to the authorities. If there's real abuse, if there's something that you're not quite sure what's going on, get the opinion of a mental health professional. Make sure they're licensed, not the Einmitziv is handelt mit Kinder, like that. You wouldn't do that for your eyes, right? Says, I get mit the Eugen, right? You wouldn't do that, right? If you needed, whatever it is, you needed someone to set your leg, you broke your leg. He hangs out with Atzula guys. He's fine. You wouldn't do that. You need a good doctor. So, you need a real professional, someone who specializes in child safety. You can go to Bika Chaylim here. That we can refer you. There's places here where you can go confidentially. And if it's nothing, they'll tell you it's nothing. And if it's something, they'll report. So, again, in my opinion, if there's vadai abuse, I think there's no question that if you're certain that a child was abused, you just go straight to the authorities. And by the way, just so you know, the police don't just arrest somebody azai. Typically in New York State, different municipalities and different states do different things, but it basically looks like this: that the authorities, the police, interview the children. A few different people interview the child separately, and they compare notes later. So if the story is not true, it usually falls apart like that. It's hard to make up a story and say the same story 3 times. So it's not like they arrest the person immediately. They usually look through things unless they feel that someone is absolutely in danger. I've dealt with way too many situations where, Mahal Tanoiga fame. We were watching him, cut it out. You can't watch these guys. That's all. Go ahead. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Just one follow-up question.
Please. There's no meter here. I'm not alone.
Of the greatest Monsey which I know, which I'm fortunate enough that my precious son lives here, Imrei Shefer, is there hope for a community that festers and harvests molesters in the name of
So the question is, what should communities do if you see other places aren't taking it seriously? Speak up. Speak up. I started speaking up 16 years ago. Nobody believed me. People thought I was crazy. My best friends thought I lost my mind. I went around saying, there's thousands of victims. People, my best friends, my relatives, people will come, Yankee, stop talking about this. Everybody's going to think you're weird. There's something. He said he had 3 friends who committed suicide because they were abused. And that's not counting all the aneurysms right? So I'm saying, look, this is real pikuach nefesh. I promised I wouldn't frighten you, so I'm not going to frighten you. So I'm not going to say that the average abuser abuses a lot of kids in their lifetime, in the general population. There is no way to stop this. You're not going to frighten them. See, the problem is that people think abusers think like you and I do. So if you were caught, you got caught with something, illegal, nothing to do with abuse. He said, all right, I warned him, he got into all kinds of trouble, he's never going to do it again. That might work with financial stuff, maybe not. Depends how sick the person is. With this stuff, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. There's no other eitzah. There's just no other way to do it. There's no other way. What am I supposed to do? People come, I think this person, I'm not a detective, nobody has to listen to me. I say, come over, I want to talk to you. No, thank you. It doesn't work. Yes? You can't do that in Yiddish, ich verstehe. There are people out there waiting for me to break my teeth. Go ahead. You can't do that in Yiddish, it's good.
When you report to the authorities, my question is, isn't it traumatic for the kids themselves, the reports and the police investigation?
Right, so that's an excellent question.
So that it would be a sacrifice. That's what you say for the sake for the public, but you're sacrificing your child.
Right. So part of that's an excellent question. If you go to the authorities, especially if it's somebody in that inner circle, right, it's traumatic for the children. So part of what I said about going to a professional therapist, that's a conversation that you have with the therapist. Sometimes a therapist may say that your child isn't strong enough to go through this. Many times they'll tell you that it's therapeutic for them. They feel that they're gaining control again. So it depends. This is not a question that I would answer. So I'm saying if you want to know as a klal how to stop this, the only way is by going to the authorities. Now, if you ask at a particular child, should I go to the authorities knowing what this is going to look like? That's a conversation that you have. It may be, one of the other ways of doing it is very often, if you speak to the authorities, they will call the person in and say, we got you. It's going to be 20 years for you. They'll cop a plea. They'll plead, and then the kid doesn't have to testify. So that's why you see a lot of times they get angry at the. Sometimes you see like somebody's arrested for a crime against children, and they get a smaller sentence that we get upset about. Why are we only doing that? And the answer is a lot of times the kids aren't up to the thing of the grueling part, the horrible situation of going to the police. Did I answer your question?
I was wondering, like you said, that the therapist is mandated to report to authorities. So the question is, what if he decides that a kid can go through? So that's, well, they let the authorities know. That doesn't mean necessarily that someone's child has to testify, right? Look, the truth is, this is really not my area of expertise. I do child safety training for parents. This is a good questions and fair questions. I'm not the best person to answer this, but I would say my understanding of things is because you testify, because you go to the authorities, that does not mean necessarily that the child has to go and testify. That's not that many times they'll work something out where the person will plead guilty to a lesser charge and get registered on a sex offender registry, so that the community is protected and the child doesn't have to go through it. Especially the Haimish Island, it's especially everybody's so related to everybody else. It's certainly harder to do this than as opposed to someone you'll never see again. Yes, please. Can I interrupt you for a second, please? I know. I'm with you. If any of you have a life, as they say in English, and need to go or want to go, or a babysitter's up, or you're bored listening to me, please, I'm serious. I don't mind at all. I was an 8th grade Rabbi for 15 years. I'm used to people walking in and out when I'm talking. Okay, so if any of you need to go or would like to go, I'll take questions as long as I can stand, but because this is important. But if any of you need to go, please don't hesitate in any way. Yes, I'm sorry. You were looking for? A chair near the door. Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is about when children feel uncomfortable around certain people. How do I deal with them? This is the person that they are in constant contact with, a cousin, a neighbor, a grandparent.
So if your children tell you that I'm not comfortable around this person, first of all, look into it carefully, gently ask, tell me, is there anything that makes you uncomfortable? Now, again, like I said before, they might not be able to verbalize what that is. But it's a good question to ask, and they might say, I don't know, it makes me feel weird. So that's fine, but you should support your children. If they tell you, let's say, this and this uncle puts me on his lap and I don't like it, and this, you tell the brother-in-law to knock it off, or tell your husband to tell his brother-in-law to knock it off, and you don't go back there or don't invite them to your house if they don't stop. You have to protect your children.
How do you bring it up for older children?
That's a great question. How do you... Let me just say, did I answer your question? Yes, so go ahead. You're next. Go ahead. Yes, supervision. It's an excellent... That's why I'm taking questions.
Supervision is extremely important. It's really important to know where your kids are, not to let them just valgezach with no adults watching. All of these things are just a recipe for disaster. Now, it's true, talking to your children makes them less likely to be abused, but you need to supervise the children. And the truth is that many of us are used to a certain level of supervision that we were when we were kids. And now we think differently. We know differently, so we have to be more careful. So the answer is supervision definitely does play a role. And I'll tell you, look at it again. An abuser is not going to come to a family, or very less likely to come, if they see that people are watching here. Right? If an abuser goes to a shul and there's 100 kids running around outside playing chaptzim or whatever, what do you call bus driver, whatever they're playing. So if the kids are running around without adult supervision, that's Gan Eden for an abuser. So you really gotta, we have to, if we're gonna stop this magafim, we're gonna stop people from chas v'shalom taking their lives and all of this stuff, we're gonna have to think differently than we did until now. And we didn't think this way, at least not when I was growing up, right? that was a longer time ago than when you grew up. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, so for older children.
Yes, how do you do with older children? So one of the things that we found very helpful is to leave the book on the coffee table, leave it on the table somewhere, and when your know-it-all teenager comes by, say, do you think this is good for the kids? What do you think about this? And then you get, you can start a conversation that way, or just look, in today's environment, people are used to having conversations like this. So, figure it out. Figure it out. And by the way, sometimes in some families, especially with boys, usually girls will be most comfortable talking to their mothers. But in some families, the boys will be more comfortable talking to their mothers sometimes, and sometimes they'll be comfortable talking to their fathers. So whoever's better at it should do it. What
we're talking about tonight.
There's no reason not to. Yeah, of course. It's mostly about comfort level. You'll see. Sometimes you just have a bad feeling. That last one, that fourth point, is about trusting your instincts. When you see something, trust your gut. That's what you're teaching the kids. Okay. Anybody else? Are we done? Did you have a hand up? Go ahead, please.
Can I take this opportunity to request supervision of the buses?
They don't let. The Haimish Shabbat. Listen, I'm not getting it. You do this as a school here. We're not going there. I'm just, I'm going home tonight. But you should talk it over. I know East Ramapo doesn't allow supervisors on the bus, but again, it's really about a culture. It's about teaching the children what's appropriate, what's not, space. All of these things help create that environment. Okay? So I'll leave this. We're going to take this one offline. Yes, please. Anybody else? Call it a night? Yes. Kennt ihr in Yiddish? Zaya get the kasha. Why is suicide connected to abuse? What? It's a good question. What?
I can answer that very well.
Go ahead. Can I go afterwards? Yeah.
Because the innocence, which is a fortune, was used to them as a weapon. That's why. The greatest thing which is precious in this world is innocence, with which we should be involved in our life. And when you strip the child of that, you show them this is arson, and it's not something that you can grow with, and that's when you take away their identity.
So what you're saying is about the about losing their innocence and is definitely extremely traumatic. I want to show you something. Who's in charge of the text message for the parents? Who's? Okay. So I'm going to send something. This is an article. These are some articles and reading material that I hope will answer your question. There's a fantastic article by a guy named Malcolm Gladwell. He's a brilliant writer. He wrote about other things, and in a college called Penn State in Pennsylvania, there's a college called Penn State, and they had a very famous football coach, Joe Paterno. He was like a goodle in football. And he had an assistant named Jerry Sandusky who abused kids there for almost 30 years, hundreds, thousands of kids. And this guy, Malcolm Gladwell, wrote an article, how did he get away with it? How could he do this and get away with it? And since it was so public, it became an opportunity to teach. See, I'm a big believer. When things are going on, we often don't like to talk about it. Let's say your teenager comes home and says, you heard somebody was abused, let's say, right? So you're uncomfortable, you don't know what to say. You say, yeah, I don't know anything about it, right? That's the best time to talk to them about it because that's what they're thinking about. Okay? In educational terms, it's called a teachable moment. A teachable moment means I'm giving shiur or I'm teaching my class something, and somebody comes in and disrupts and yells something out, so I can argue with the person, or I could try to say what they bring it into the lesson because everybody's looking at that person. Okay? So the idea is that once people were talking about this Penn State, Sandusky wrote this. It's 5,000 words. It's a very long article. I encourage you to read every word of it. It's perfectly tzniistic. And he describes the grooming process and how these guys do it. I promise not to scare you, but I'll do it in a not scary way. When I first started, I'm a yeshiva guy. I don't know about this stuff, right? I knew I had to learn fast. So one of the things I read, there's one particular book written by a doctor who went around to prisons, imagine what a job that is, interviewing serial pedophiles, people who abused tons of kids. She went from jail to jail interviewing them, and it's fascinating. She writes in the Hakdama, in the introduction, she writes that the reason that I did this was I wanted to give you, readers, what these people look like. I wanted to give you the recipe. I wanted to give you the information that you should know who to watch out from. Because I'm going to show you, because I interviewed all these people. And she writes, there is no profile. Some of them were brilliant, some of them were foolish, some of them were charming, some of them were weird. Some of them were wealthy, some of them were poor, attractive and ugly. But I can tell you how they work. And she described their secrets, how they got away with it. Just like you would do. If you were putting an alarm in your house, who would you want to find out where to put the alarms, right? The ganav. You go to a thief. So she did this, and a lot of the things that he writes in the article, she wrote in the book. I'll give you one very quick one. These abusers are brilliant. They're evil and they're brilliant. And a lot of the abusers that I've unfortunately been involved with and helping to get them behind bars and other things like that and exposed, have variations of these types of techniques. So he writes in this thing, and again, I'll give you the link so you can send it around so you can all print it out and read it. I really encourage you to read it. So Malcolm Gladwell's article, it's called In Plain View. In plain view means in front of everybody. That was the question. How did they get away with it in plain view? And he writes about a guy named Clay, a soccer coach. His name was Clay, C-L-A-Y. That was his first name. And he was a serial abuser. And here was the shtick that he did. He wanted to find out, remember, what were the two things? Come on. What were the two things they looked for? Naive, what? Right? No family and naive. That's what they're looking for, right? So how does he find out who has a close family? So this chaya, what he did was, he had all kinds of patent and all kinds of tricks that he would use. One of the things that he would do is, he was a soccer coach, so the kids would have like knee pads and elbow pads and, equipment. He would steal a piece of equipment from one of the kids. And he writes it in the article. You can read it, He would take a piece of equipment from the kids, and he would go to the house a day later to see what the house looks like. If it's orderly, not good. If it's chaotic, it's great for him. He would go to the mother and say, hey, Joey forgot this. Joey forgot this in practice. So tell me, how does Joey like soccer? So, it was great. Last week you won 3-2. What does this guy think to himself? What? Forget it. He talks to his mother. I'm out of here. And she says, I don't know. He doesn't talk. We don't communicate. I try to talk to him. And Clay says to himself, this is somebody I can abuse. These are the things that they do. Another thing that this guy used to do is he would change the time in middle of practice. Like, let's say they practice from 2 to 4 o'clock. He would say, okay, guys, we got a big game on Sunday. We're going to 4:30 today. And of the 12 kids, let's say, 15 kids were on the team, 5 of them would raise their hands and say, I got to text my mother. If I'm ever more than 5 minutes late, I have to let my mother know. And he thinks to himself, not these guys. Okay? So that's just one thing that I really would encourage you to read about. What I wanted to mention in response to your question about the why kids do this, this is I think I'm going to finish. I'll end this and wish you all mazel and bracha and commend you Menalim for doing this. Really, this is great. This is important, and I really respect. When we first spoke the first time, I said, I'm here. You just let me know when. So this is a thing, it's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you have a phone, you can do it now, or if you have a smartphone, you can do it at home. It's fine. I'll send you a link to it. Abraham Maslow had this Chassidish, this idea. And all my years as a Rebbe, I started teaching in 1982. It was a long time ago. I taught, most of my years, I taught the weakest kids in the school, which I volunteered for. 8th grade, it's like a suicide mission, 8th grade, the weakest kids. And I went, this theory helped me understand a lot. I really encourage all of you as parents to really get this. You have to really study it. Maslow says that there are 5 sets of needs. If I'm not explaining it clearly, please raise your hand and say, what are you talking about? Please. If I'm not clear, tell me, please. This is really important. So Maslow says it's like a triangle. There are 5 levels of needs, and they're sequential, meaning you can't get to level 2 if you don't have level 1. That's basically the idea. So the lowest level is body needs. Food, water, you'll excuse me, relieving ourselves, shelter, basic human needs. The second is safety, to feel comfortable, to feel safe, to feel like you belong. The third is socialization, friendship, love, relationships, chavashaft. That's level 3. 4 is self-esteem, to feel good about yourself, and that comes from parents. That's a great predictor of self-esteem. That Maslow says 3 is family, and 4 is self-esteem, and 5 is self-actualization, which means to steig. Like we say in Yiddish, to steig, to grow, to develop, to be all you could be. Now, I want you to really understand as parents how powerful this stuff is. So let's imagine that, think back to Hurricane Sandy. I don't know how you were affected by it, if you lived here at the time. Let's assume that you lost power and your basement's full of water. And now it's the 4th day, and you haven't taken a shower, and everything smells, and it's gloopy, and you don't feel like a mensch. Now, imagine if somebody picks up a phone and calls you up and says, hey, Yankee, how you doing? The guy from Denver, good friend of yours. You went to Yeshiva together. You'd love to schmooze with him. Hey, Yank, how's it going? How's the mishpucha? Everything all right? How are you? Am I in the mood of having a conversation when my hands are sticking together because I haven't washed them? You just can't. It doesn't work. You're not in the mood for anything. Same thing if you haven't eaten. Monsey Yom Kippur, after Havdullah. Hey, it was herzig. Alles in order. See you later, man. Got to go home and eat. So these needs crowd everything else out. Now imagine safety. Car breaks down in a terrible neighborhood. You have 2% left on your battery. Okay? Same thing. You get a phone call. No? How's it going? Can we go out for coffee maybe? You know, they've got this new place here. What are you, crazy? Imagine if you had a personal coach, or you have a madrech or a ruv. Somebody calls you up and says, "Gedenkst man gerät wegen the things you're supposed to be learning, or what are your goals for the next 5 years?" I want to be alive in 5 minutes. You don't have time for anything. If you're not feeling safe, nothing works.
That could also explain the suicide, right?
I'm sorry?
That could explain the suicide.
That's what I'm saying. So the children who don't feel safe, Maslow would say, that's exactly, very good. You're good Talmidah. Excellent. Good. No, think about it. That's what Maslow's saying. Now, what you said is correct about losing their innocence and feeling, that people took advantage of them. But this piece of Maslow, I want you to really think about it. Think about it. There's so many different applications. Your kid comes home from school, a simple, fun one. Your kid comes home from school and says, "Ich will get aus spielen." I'm sorry, excuse me. You want the kid to do homework. Okay? Kids got homework to do, Chassidish or whatever it is. Because you want to go out. You're going out with your husband later tonight. Or you're going out with some friends. So you want to get the homework done. So you say, sit down and do your homework. He says, "Ja, aber I'm mit gechappet auf dem Bus." There you go. Right? I'm mit gechappet. Das do Engel at chappet mit der ganze Zeit. So, all right, do your homework. We'll talk about it later. What would Maslow say? He's not feeling safe. How could he focus on his homework? Homework is a 5. Right? Kid's not feeling safe because somebody's chopping him and he's going back the next day and he has to face this kid again. I guarantee you his mind is not going to be on his homework. So you can you can bribe them and punish them. It's not going to work. I'll give you another example. It's not only scary stuff. I once thought of it in my yeshiva. Ich gehe verheeren. Ich suche mich was mit Altina. Just suggestion. Listen, so I used to verheer the classes. I was a manal here in Monsey for 20 years. So when I was a manal, I used to go and verheer the classes. And I was explaining Maslow to somebody right before I was about to go into a class in verheer. And they say, "Hey, Horowitz," me, Yankee, "what's the matter with you? These kids are scared." Maslow would say, "Du willst reden wegen a Teusvis." He's worried if I'm going to call on him. So I'm saying, so Rashi zukt azoi, and Teusvis zukt azoi, and what's the kid thinking? Okay, he's going up the rows and down this way, or maybe he goes this way and that way, and the kid's thinking the whole time he doesn't want to get called on. So Maslow would say, "What's that Teusvis?" Isn't it? No Teusvis. The kid's worried about being called on. So I tried it. I went into the classroom. I think it was a 7th grade, a Kitteches, if he designed something like that, Zion. So I went in. I said, Rabbi, I said, "Listen, new rules. If I call on you to say something, you can say pass. And I'll just pass to the next kid. You're not punished. It doesn't count against you, nothing. And and I said, if you're not comfortable speaking in public, if I ask you a question, make a motion that you'll talk to me privately, and you can tell it to me privately." Everybody's grades started going up. It was a totally different environment. And I like to think I'm an average intelligence guy, and I read this Maslow thing. So this affects everything. There's so much that you could learn just by doing Maslow, by thinking about it in terms of your children, when they're unhappy, and when they're kvetchy, and when they need things. Make sure those bottom levels are done, because, so, like you said, Maslow would say that a child that was never abused never feels safe again. Especially if the abuser is someone who should have been protecting him. So, if the abuser is someone who should have been protecting them, so not only did somebody abuse them, they were abused by somebody who should be protecting them. How could they ever feel safe again? And if you listen to victims, people don't believe it. They say, he makes it up. You listen to the victims, they say, "Ich bin gegangen zu einem Manal, ich bin gegangen zu einem man hat mich nicht geglaubt. Nobody believed me, and it was worse than the abuse itself." And it makes no sense. I mean, it's not. To them, it was worse because they were hurt, and they went to somebody hoping that somebody would believe them. And now nobody believes them. So Maslow would say that that child is not going to be able to learn, have socialization, friends, have self-esteem, be able to do things. So this is how I actually realized, 15, 16 years ago, that so many of the kids that I was working with had been abused. And I was working with kids, who were no longer religious. I don't like the word off the derech, but whatever. But I was working with teens at risk. And I began to notice that there's really two categories of kids who are no longer religious. There are some people, adults, young adults, who are not religious, but they have some maleben. They're working, they have hobbies, they're happy, they're just not frim. That's one category. And the second category is kids who aren't only abandoning religion, they're abandoning life. They're not smoking pot. They're doing hard cocaine or heroin. They're not, hanging out with friends. They're cutting themselves or hurting themselves. So initially, I would conflate them, like put them all in one big chulant. But they're totally different things. So I wrote this probably, 14, 15 years ago. I wrote that in my experience, people who abandon only religion, there could be so many different reasons. But the kids who are abandoning life, I said at the time that over 90% were abused. So when you see a kid, you ask what to look for. When you see an adult or a young adult who just can't seem to do anything, and you say, okay, why don't you... It's usually something like that. They feel this way. Maslow would say there's no way that they could, do this unless they get professional help, which is why it's so important to do that. So again, I want you to walk away empowered. I don't want you to be frightened. I gave you everything you need to have real conversations with your children, to listen to them, to be able to understand what's going on. I live in Monsey. I'm in touch with you, wonderful Manalim. If you want to follow up, if there's something specifically, I'll be glad to come back and follow up with you. I'm going to be meeting with the Malamdim, but I will be glad to follow up if you have questions afterwards. You should have questions afterwards. Then I'm not running away. I love you, Maisid. I love what you guys are doing here. And I'm really, it's an honor to be part of it. Thank you. If you have, Rabbi Say, the books, thanks to a donor who wishes to remain anonymous, the books are your gift. If you came together, if you're a couple, if you're here together with your wife or with your husband, please bring the second book up here, if you don't mind. And if you're interested, I've been doing a lot of work in Z9Child work. I published a beginner Chumash book and a beginner Gemara book that we sold about 15,000 of these and 3,500 Gemara books in 2 years. If you went to Yeshiva all the years, you don't know what's flying. Or if you have a child that's struggling, this really breaks down the words into prefixes and suffixes and all of this. I'll leave it here for you to look at. I'm sorry? It's only in English for now. Yes, okay, so I have this here, and I'll bring in a Gemara book if any of you are interested. You should all have mazel and brucha and nachas from your children. Thank you.